I'd like to spend a few minutes and talk about attributes in Kumu. When you develop a map, when you create an element, a connection, or a loop, each one of those entities has four attributes defined for it as a default. One of them is the label, one is a type, one is a description, and then one or more tags you can assign to that entity when you create it. So each one of those entities has attributes, though depending upon what it is that you're mapping, you might want to have a number of additional attributes associated with certain attributes associated with elements, some with links, and some with loops, depending upon what it is that you're mapping. As a couple of examples, here is a map of a group of people that attended a conference, and for each individual, there is a description, an image, and note that there's a private label here saying that the individuals who look at this map that don't have the rights to develop it don't actually see this link to the image. And then there's a location, a URL, and a set of answers to questions that the participants provided. That's one example of something that someone wanted to capture associated with the content of a map. Here's one that was part of an article in Forbes magazine. It's a map of people in Africa and a question about how the richest people in Africa are connected. And for each individual, they, in addition to the default attributes, they define a rank, a net worth, country, industry, gender, and age, and then they did some things in the background with perspective so that they could actually connect these individuals based upon some of those attributes that they defined, so that I could turn off industry and say which countries are they in, or how old are they, so that these are separate sets of connections that were done based upon what was defined for the attributes. And in this particular map, which is the 86th Annual Academy Awards, they defined one type of element, which were actors, and they added an attribution and an image for it, and you notice that the images show up in the map. And then they just defined a type of element called picture, and that has a box office revenue associated with it. And then they have the Oscar and the number of or the particular individuals who were in contention for that Oscar. And notice that the size of the elements for the different pictures are controlled in the perspective based upon the value of the revenue. So it's something else that can be done with the values for attributes. The extent of what you can do with attributes is pretty much only limited by your imagination and what you set about to figure out how to depict and present as information to someone else. Now there is a page in the help file about creating and using attributes, and you can read it. It's not very long, though. As with most of the things in Kumu, once you read it, the best way to really understand attributes is to spend time and experiment with them and learn through the experimentation. So that if you want a new attribute, you simply tell it that you want a new attribute, and you decide what you want to call it, and I'll just call this one city, and then I'll hit the enter key, and now I've defined an attribute city, and that will show up on every single element that I look at. It will also show up on all of the links, and it would show up on the loops too if there were some, but there aren't any loops in this particular map. So I've defined it now I can look at it and say, all right, what do I want it to be a string, which is a short text like a label, or a text field like the description field? Is it a URL or a number? Whether there's one or how many entities there are, whether it's a general category or whether I define a new category altogether. In this one that I showed as an example, if you look at this, you will see that answer was actually defined as a brand new category of attributes, so that once they defined answer as a category of attribute, they could simply use it over and over again, so that all of these questions here, all of the questions is simply a repeat of the same category of attribute over and over again. Whether the attribute is public or private, you can change the name of it, and there are some settings that you can indicate as to whether or not this particular attribute is relevant to certain kinds of things, so that you can have an attribute that's only relevant to elements or connections or even certain types of elements and not other types, so that they wouldn't, as I said here, city shows up on every single element, connection, and loop, if there were any. You could say the city is only relevant to the elements and has nothing to do with connections and loops. And once you do this, you can then go ahead and add the city value on each one of the elements. You can also go into here and do settings to say, as I talked about, say here it says city is relevant to basic, and it's relevant to intermediate, and it's relevant to advanced. So you could say that city is only relevant to basic elements and not the other kinds, or some connection types, or none of them. And if you want to manage the elements themselves, once you go to the attributes and you select city, you can then go ahead and change the parameters of that attribute. So that's an introduction to the way that you can create attributes, and you can create as many of them as you need to in terms of what it is that the information that you're trying to capture about the things that you're mapping to provide an understanding about the relationships. And when I do the next decoration video, I'll talk more about how you can use the attributes in conjunction with doing the decoration for the map itself. So hope you found this informative, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.